This is my EUB343 assignment 2, Showcase and Reflection on PEX. My name is William Harper. My student number is 09802851. My tutor's name is Mrs. Elise Bray, and I am in the Tuesday afternoon workshop. So just recently completed my professional experience at a senior school. There was 2 campuses in the school, a junior and a senior. There are 1,860 enrolled students and the school has a capacity of 2,417 students. So the class I'll be discussing today was a Year 8 history class. It was a mixed ability class with some EALD students, some students with ASD, and most of the students had access to a device. So our learning intention was to gain understanding of the history of the colonization of the Americas. So we were looking at key colonizers, key dates, and key events. So start out with a diagnostic assessment. We do this to gauge students' prior knowledge, the skills, their strengths, their weaknesses. It's got to be relative to our learning goals. It gives us as a teacher an opportunity to identify their individual needs, elucidate misconceptions. Then we are able to plan and implement learning experiences, like tailor something to individually help these students' needs. And a diagnostic assessment is usually implemented prior to starting a new learning experience. So here I have an example of a diagnostic assessment I gave to my students. I provided each student with a sheet of questions. I instructed them to fill it out to the best of their ability. I collected samples at the end of the lesson. Prior to the next lesson, I analyzed the responses relative to the essential aspects of the concept, and I took note of their misconceptions and what they need to work on. This example is from student 5, which I will refer to them as for the remainder of this video. So student 5 was a great example. They gave me a lot of great information, and it was a pretty good indicator of where the entire class was at. They did have some prior knowledge on the subject, but through this diagnostic assessment, I was able to identify where their weaknesses were and what we could work on as a class together. The feedback written on the assessment sheet is to be used by the student as a recipe for future action, and the feedback is formative in that the student will use it to improve their performance. So I've gone through and just made notes where they didn't give me enough detail or where the answer was wrong, and just simple spelling errors, things like that. After this diagnostic assessment, I was able to track their progress with a table, and we track our students' progress so that we can capture evidence of their learning that can be used by students to inform their learning, and it can be used by teachers to inform better teaching practices. We do this so we can make evidence-based improvements to our pedagogical practices. So here in the first column, this is the one measuring how these students went with this diagnostic assessment. The majority of them showed some evidence of mastery. They were able to give me a similar understanding. They were able to present an understanding similar to that of student 5. Roughly half the answers were mostly correct, and we were able to gauge what areas needed work. There's only 5 students that showed no evidence of mastery. Okay, so once I was able to gauge where they're at with that diagnostic assessment, we began a learning experience. As made evident by the progress tracking, clearly the majority of the students needed a bit more background knowledge to move closer towards mastery of the content. Following this diagnostic assessment, there was a series of lessons which consisted of note-taking, source analysis, and peel paragraph writing. I'll just show you some examples of the slides I gave. We would inform the students what we're learning, why we're learning it, and how they will know they understand. So this is just an example of the kind of information I would present to them, and that I would underline the key information that I want them to copy down. So we would summarize it as a class, and they would have the notes in their workbooks for future formative assessment. Here is an explanation on how to answer source questions, and I would show them this slide every time we were to answer source questions, just to really solidify in their minds how to do it. This is an example of a source I would give them and the questions that they would be required to answer. The peel paragraph for me was more of a formative assessment that I will present in this video. I would give them some sources and instruct them to compose for me a peel paragraph using evidence from the sources. So here I've given them an example of the kind of detail I wanted in their peel paragraph writing, and I would leave that up on the projector while they wrote their peel paragraph. So this was a formative assessment that I gave to the students. Now, with the formative assessment, we're able to gauge their progress towards the learning goals. It gives us an opportunity to elucidate student progress, provide feedback and feed forward. We're able to modify teaching and learning activities to better respond to students' needs. And they should be conducted frequently during the learning activities. So the following example is by the same student, student 5. You can see here that they've given me a great example of a peel paragraph. Using what I left on the board and having had the learning experience prior to this, they were much better equipped to give me the level of detail that I required before we moved on. So here I tracked their progress once again. As you can see, I gave student 5 a 2 for that. I believed that they had a mastery of the content. And with the previous learning experience, there was a few other students that I believed were writing at that level. As you can see, all of them presented at least some mastery of the content. So from my diagnostic to my formative assessment, there was some clear progress being made by the students. From this point, I gave them another formative assessment in the form of a quiz. That's, it's a website called Quizzes. Students were given access URL to access the quiz. They were instructed to take the quiz individually. This formative assessment was designed to test their knowledge after the learning experience. It was done to gauge their progress towards mastery of the content, and the following results displayed are from student 5 once again. So you can see here they've gotten the first 7 questions right. They got 2 incorrect here and 1 wrong there. So you can see they got an overall score of 90%. Here's just some copies of the questions that I was asking them. They're directly related to the learning experience and the note-taking that we had previously done. So you can see here, they got question 10 wrong. They got question 14 incorrect as well. I believed that they had displayed a mastery of the contents. So you can see here, I gave student 5 a 2, strong evidence of mastery. They, due to their diagnostic assessment, the learning experience, and the Peel paragraph formative assessment, they were able to demonstrate strong evidence of mastery of the content. And these are my references. Thank you very much.